Hi, I'm Maya Haasz, Associate Professor of Pediatrics at the University of Colorado. I'm so excited to share our publication, Caregivers Asking About Firearms in Homes Their Children Visit. Reducing firearm access among children has the potential to decrease morbidity and mortality. So far, most initiatives have focused on improving home firearm storage, but the risk to children extends beyond their own homes. We don't know very much about whether caregivers ask about firearms within households their children visit, or which information sources, for example, healthcare providers or family, increase the asking behavior. The objective of our study was to estimate the prevalence of asking and evaluate the relationship between individual information sources and caregivers asking about firearms in homes their children visit. We conducted a survey of U.S. adults in May and June of 2023. For our study, we included respondents who had children 17 or under living in the home. Our outcome of interest was the yes-no response to a question, have you ever asked other parents if there were guns in the home? We examined the sources of previous firearm safety information by asking, have you received gun safety information, for example, safe storage, from any of these individuals or settings? Options included a family member, a class, work training, a healthcare provider, social media, the child's school or a childcare provider, or if they received information from other caregivers or parents. Participants had the option to select all responses that applied. For analysis, we also summed the number of sources from which each person said they'd received firearm safety information. For example, only another caregiver was one source, a caregiver and social media 2 sources, and so on. Our analytic sample was 1,536 participants. We used bivariate statistics, logistic regression, and chi-square statistics to describe the relationships between sources of firearm safety information and asking. We used multivariable logistic regressions and predictive marginal methods to estimate the relationship between the number of information sources and asking. All analyses were weighted to be nationally representative. Among the caregivers in our study, 29.6% said that they had asked about firearms at a home their child visited. Every source of information was associated with an increased likelihood of asking, and that included healthcare providers. And each source of information increased the likelihood of asking by 50%. This means that 16% of those who had not received firearm safety information from any source asked about firearms in the home their children visit, compared to 79% among those who heard from 8 sources. We know that reducing unsupervised firearm access among children and teens, both in their homes and at homes they visit, is an important component of firearm injury prevention. We found that every source of information may increase the likelihood of asking about firearms at other homes, and the more places caregivers hear this information, the better. These findings reinforce the importance of pediatricians counseling caregivers about asking about firearms in homes their children visit. And it's likely that these findings extend to other forms of firearm safety counseling as well. On a broader level, our findings also point to an exciting opportunity to re-envision our approach to firearm injury prevention. We need to talk about firearm safety at work, with friends, with family, and on social media to accelerate a cultural shift where firearm safety conversations are normalized. Our study had several limitations. Importantly, the study is cross-sectional, so we can't attribute a causal relationship. Also, the number of sources of firearm safety information doesn't necessarily equal the number of overall exposures. I'd like to thank my team for supporting this work, and thank you for watching. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out.